Georgia Railroad Company. The East Tennessee and Georgia, as built, connected Knoxville, Tennessee with Dalton, Georgia. And the only way to go from Knoxville to Chattanooga by rail was to go from Knoxville to Dalton via the ET&G, catching another train at Dalton on the Western and Atlantic Railroad back to Chattanooga. That changed in August of 1859 with the completion of the Chattanooga extension of the ET&G Railroad, which branched off of their main line at Cleveland, Tennessee, running through McDonald and Ooltewah, Tennessee to Chattanooga. Construction of the Chattanooga extension was funded and supervised by a major stockholder in the company, Colonel James A. Whiteside. In 1894, the Southern Railway took over ownership of this property, and in 1906, the Southern Railway upgraded this line by raising it up on a fill. They added a second track for bi-directional running, and they also modernized the signal system to the standards of that era. That still, however, was not enough to satisfy Southern Railway management, and in 1954 they abandoned the route we're using today through the tunnel in favor of a new route to the north that bypasses Missionary Ridge altogether. That new route was off to the right at Grand Junction and is still used today by Southern's successor, Norfolk Southern. And here in just a moment, we're going to be crossing our longest and highest bridge over South Chickamauga Creek at 65 feet high and 360 feet in length. Off to the right, as we cross over the creek, you will see the CSX Railroad's Tyner Branch. The Tyner Branch was initially constructed in 1942 by the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway to connect the Western and Atlantic Railroad main line with the Volunteer Army Ammunition Plant here in Chattanooga, where they manufactured TNT from World War II up through Desert Storm. Today, the volunteer site is now the home of the Enterprise South Industrial Park and the Volkswagen Assembly Plant, where they manufacture the Atlas SUV and the ID4 electric car. A bit of irony that a site once used to make material to fight the German army is now the home of a German car plant. Our next bridge here in just a moment will be over the Western and Atlantic Railroad. The Western and Atlantic was the very first railroad completed into the city of Chattanooga, being completed in May of 1850. It was built by the state of Georgia, operated by the state of Georgia, and to this day it is still owned by the state of Georgia. So yes, you heard me correct, Georgia does own land in Tennessee, aside from Neyland Stadium. Go Dogs. Now when the Western and Atlantic Railroad was initially chartered in 1836, it was not going to be permitted to cross the Tennessee state line, let alone enter the city of Chattanooga. The reason being, it is the Georgia State Railroad. The state of Tennessee didn't exactly like the idea of their neighbor to the south building a railroad across their line. Can't say I blame them, I wouldn't want my neighbor building a railroad across my backyard either. But that same gentleman I mentioned earlier, Colonel James Whiteside, using his power as a Tennessee state legislator, secured permission for that line to cross the state line into downtown Chattanooga. Now today, though it is still owned by the state of Georgia, it is now operated by CSX Transportation as their Atlanta to Chattanooga main line under a lease from the state of Georgia. They dispatch it from their headquarters in Jacksonville, Florida. A little bit about the rail cars on our train today that y'all are riding on. The cars on the very back of the train and in the middle, I'm going to cover them both in one little tale here because they're virtually identical cars and have the same history. Those two cars were both built in 1947 for the Central of Georgia Railway by the American Car and Foundry Corporation in St. Charles, Missouri. They are today cars 907 and 661. The Central of Georgia Railway assigned them to a train named the Nancy Hanks II, operating daily between Savannah and Atlanta, Georgia, with 8 intermediate stops in between. And even with those 8 intermediate stops, the Nancy, as it was commonly known, still averaged over 50 miles an hour, making it at one time the fastest regularly scheduled train in the United States. That train was named after the famous undefeated standardbred racehorse, Nancy Hanks, which in turn was named for Nancy Hanks Lincoln, the mother of Abraham Lincoln. Those two cars are considered lightweight cars, being made mostly of aluminum and weighing between 70 and 75 tons. Yes, that is considered lightweight. Compare that to car 906 here at the front of the train that I'm speaking from, which is a heavyweight car weighing between 85 and 90 tons. It's made out of solid steel. Car 906 is the oldest car on the train today, having been built in 1924, so right at 100 years ago, by the Pullman Car and Manufacturing Company of Chicago, Illinois. It was built for the Central of Georgia Railway. It was used on trains such as the Seminole, the City of Miami, the Dixie Flyer, and the Man O' War. The Man O' War was the Columbus to Atlanta, Georgia counterpart for the Nancy Hanks II starting in 1947. Car 906 is unique, aside from being the only heavyweight car on the train today. It's also unique from the other two as it is a segregated car, known as a Jim Crow car. It still retains a central dividing wall in the middle that divides the car into two distinct halves. It is one of only 3 known examples of Jim Crow cars in the United States maintained in active service with that wall intact. Other cars of that style that operate have their walls removed, while others that still have, aside from these 3 that have their walls intact, are merely display pieces or are undergoing restoration. And while that is a very unfortunate time in our nation's history, it is one that we must still learn from and preserve. If you don't remember anything else you learned today, I want you to remember this. A nation that does not learn from or preserve its history, whether it is good or bad, is doomed to repeat it. And that's why we keep that wall in place in car 906 today. An example of a desegregated Jim Crow car is car 907 on the back of the train. That car had its walls removed in 1955 by order of the Interstate Commerce Commission. If you were riding in car 907, look along the line of fluorescent lights right above your window, you can see a gap in there towards the middle of the car where that wall was removed. Now, the sounding of the horn there means we are on approach to our tunnel. 986 feet long and completely hand dug. 2 crews began digging in 1856, breaking through the middle in 1858, only 3 inches off center, side to side of one another. They chose to dig the tunnel by hand because an underground spring located near this construction site rendered black powder as a propellant useless, because when powder gets wet, it will not go kaboom. And also, that underground spring had weakened the stratified limestone rock that composes much of Missionary Ridge in this area, to the point where engineers feared blasting might cause a total collapse of the tunnel's construction site. So they chose to have this tunnel dug entirely by hand, using primarily Irish labor. While we are inside this tunnel, there is only about 10 to 15 inches of clearance on either side of this train at any given point, so please do not lean one way or the other too far to the left or right. If you're claustrophobic, you're on the wrong train. If you're afraid of the dark, just close your eyes. September 21st, 1890, there was a train approaching this tunnel from the Chattanooga side, headed for Atlanta, on what was known at that time the East Tennessee, Virginia, and Georgia Railroad. As that train approached this tunnel pulled by locomotive 419, due to the incompetence of the engineer and the inexperience of the fireman, they allowed that locomotive boiler to run low on water, causing it to suffer an absolutely catastrophic explosion. It launched that locomotive's boiler off the frame of the engine, and it landed about 100 feet away, facing the opposite direction. Killed the engineer and the fireman instantly. That locomotive would be returned to operating condition after that accident. It would be ultimately renumbered as Southern Railway number 107. Today, that locomotive has been preserved, and you can see that locomotive today on display in downtown Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, where it sits on the parkway dressed up as Dollywood Express number 107. Across the street from the River Chase Lodge at the corner of Dollywood Lane and the Parkway. So next time you see that engine, just remember, it blew up in Chattanooga about 133 years ago. And we are now on the Chattanooga side of Missionary Ridge, in an area that was highly contested over during the Battle for Missionary Ridge in November of 1863 as part of the Chattanooga Campaign. The Chattanooga Campaign was a multi-day campaign that took place over at Wauhatchie on the other side of the mountain, Lookout Mountain, Missionary Ridge, and Ringgold Gap. Primarily, fighting took place on Lookout Mountain and Missionary Ridge. Lookout Mountain was on November 24th, ending in a victory for Union General Joseph Hooker and the Army of the Cumberland in what has become famously known as the Battle Above the Clouds. The Missionary Ridge took place on November 25th, and ended in a victory for Union Generals William T. Sherman, George H. Thomas, Ulysses Grant, and Joseph Hooker. Shortly after the Battle of Missionary Ridge, the Confederate Lieutenant Commander General Braxton Bragg and Patrick Claver, back towards Atlanta, pursued in early 1864 by General Sherman and a box of matches as the campaign and pursued by General Sherman as he began his Atlanta campaign to march to the sea. And during the assault on Missionary Ridge, a young lieutenant colonel, later lieutenant general by the name of Arthur MacArthur, led his Wisconsin regiment up the side of Missionary Ridge with the shout of "On Wisconsin," today one of their state mottos. He also commandeered the regimental colors from a fallen comrade. For his actions at Missionary Ridge, MacArthur would be awarded our nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor. Some years later, during World War II, his son, General Douglas MacArthur, would be awarded the same medal for his actions in the Philippine campaign. They are one of only two known father-son duos to have both received the Medal of Honor, with the other duo being President Theodore Roosevelt and his son Theodore Jr. We're now coming into East Chattanooga. Once the train comes to a stop, you are invited to exit the train with us and join us down at our turntable. We're going to take the locomotive off the train, put it out on the turntable, and spin it around to face the opposite direction to pull our train back to Grand Junction. Following which there will be a brief look inside our restoration and repair shop here at East Chattanooga. While here at East Chattanooga, you are welcome to stay on the train if you wish to do so. You are not required to get off, but if you do choose to get off, I do encourage this because this is one of only a handful of places anywhere in the country where you can view up close an original railroad turntable doing its as intended purpose of turning a full-size locomotive around. Also, if you take our shop tour, you'll be able to get an up-close look at 3 of our steam locomotives. Steam locomotive number 610, built in 1952 for the U.S. Army. Locomotive 630, built in 1904 for the Southern Railway. And inside the shop, a good up-close look at Southern Railway number 4501, built in 1911. Of those 3, the 4501 and the 630 are both operational and operate on weekends from March through early November. They are both authentic coal-fired steam locomotives. In fact, if you start looking over to the left between engines 710 and 606, you can actually see the 630 sitting over there in winter storage. While here at East Chattanooga, we do have a few safety rules that we do ask you to please follow. Please do not wander off on your own onto the tracks, gravel, or ballast. Please stay behind all marked yellow lines and safety ropes. And please do not climb on any of the equipment here around East Chattanooga. Not only is this equipment here for sometimes repair work or restoration, these are historic artifacts, and if you climb on them, it is a fire hazard. What I mean by that is if you climb on it and you fall off and bust your head, I'm going to laugh at you and then I'm going to get fired. So it's a fire hazard. Our exit points today will be at both ends of the middle car. Please watch your step as you go down the stairs. Make a left and head for the turntable. And at this point, I will be handing the tour over to my assistant, Jack, down at the turntable. Also, I do thank you for riding with us. Jack and I will not be going back to Grand Junction with you today. We are changing crews to the evening crew that will be running our Holiday Lights train tonight. So we'll be handing the train over to engineer Zach and conductor Matt and his trainman Jonathan for the return trip today. Thank you once again for riding with us, and we'll see you down at the turntable shortly.
until they were both retired and discharged from the Navy in 1993. Afterwards, the emergency taken over $250 meaning that the 1899 before walk called the museum for $500 as a letter. The church was never going to find a cheap alone like that ever again. Located in the museum that same year, where they've been ever since. The date 1829 is completely service for diesels, and can be seen on Thursday and Thursday the holiday light straight. Now, as I mentioned, it's a sister number 1824. Now, locomotive is currently stored out of service, which you can see as you may have over the shop. And the locomotive, the last time we were in 2018, is currently used for storage, but also is used for spare parts for their sister locomotive. And we've got a keen eye for pursuing that train is currently on track number 1. Good horn being coming in quick along the couple, just on our side for track number 2.
Playing a game with a train. This is a Central.
go back to the bank.
That's your grandmother.
That's perfect. That 4, 5,
Yeah, call your grandmother. We'll just take her card. We'll just take your card because your card is bigger than mine. Let's give her a camera. We'll go eat.
Oh,
Sure. There's a gun corral anywhere near here?
But you said on what day?
There were gun corral anywhere around here?
Of what?
Gun corral. I got a gift card. What they like?
I don't know. Was that phone?
Well, Robert Barber gave me a gift card.
Oh, yeah.
$60. Yeah, you got the Mine's on the main. I get stuff like
Oh, so you are. Right, I know.
Looks cool with the lights.
Oh yeah, they'll keep buying that. Alright, take care. That's why I come here 5:30 in the morning for some.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah.
You need to get done with it today. About 5:30. You'll be able to use the dining car. That's what I do. I gotta go to 3:30, 4 o'clock. Let's go back to McDonald's because I'm gonna eat. About 10 minutes. You can take 10 minutes. Mine's like 28.
A restaurant station? You said you were
Even though I don't live far either.
Yeah.
I got 15 minutes. I could race through because there's no cars at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was racing through before I got here. Oh yeah, I thought Travis had chicken one day. I know. I saw his truck when I came in for a gal home. I went through the chicken one and oh, it's Travis. I forgot. I didn't see him when I saw you yesterday. Chicken one. Because we both live in chicken one. Good. I can grab a